Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We'll get to the JRC just here in a moment, but first the disclaimers and the trigger warnings. If you're unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, pertinent links are going to be in the description box. We have Autistic Hoya's massive archive in regards to the JRC, where we get the bulk of our material for this channel. In regards to the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, the article written by Neuroplastic, the one where they interviewed over 800 ABA professionals in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center's so-called behavior modification program. Remember, it did get JRC riled up enough to threaten Neuroplastic with a defamation lawsuit if they didn't remove it from the website. Neuroplastic refused. Please read it if you haven't. If you have, please share it on all your social media. We also have linked in there Neuroplastic's GoFundMe in case the JRC ever does see through with their threat, because unlike them, we don't have weird, shady things where we somehow have access to unlimited funding. Alright? Trigger warnings. When we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips or surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please use your headphones. Also, this channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity and speak on dark subjects. If your child's 16 and younger and watching this, parental supervision is advised. Attached to that, trigger warning. We are delving into JRC, absolute gaslighting, victim blaming, absolute major stupidity on parade. Because the JRC tends to have, as a response to anyone that is bringing up points about how insane their program is this copy and paste nonsense, where they essentially just keep repeating the same things over and over and over again, whether or not the first time they put said comments out have been addressed repeatedly, but the JRC keeps acting like they can't see it, they can't hear it, and they're going to repost the same crap again, means I have to say the same crap again. There's just not enough cup of tea, folks. There really isn't. Oh, God. Somebody get those poor FDA panelists some bourbon for being subjected to this for this long. Good God. I mention it because when it's this level of stupid, they are stating things that are not just wrong, but ridiculously wrong. Almost like they're trying to, oh no, this is an alternative universe where nobody responded to our insanity. So, expect that. I can't help it. I can't handle the hostile stupid. Especially not just getting it from the usual suspects, but now getting it from the federal government to the point that it's starting to look pretty goddamn bleak. We'll cover that at some point. But I want to make sure that I am not, emoting while discussing those points. So, trying to digest it all until I can come up with a video or go live and be logical about things. Yeah, okay. Where we left off the other day, with respect to the alleged risks of the ASD treatment, FDA has not satisfied its burden to prove, based on all the available evidence, that ESD treatment poses a unreasonable and substantial risk of injury. We're going to continue to read it, and then I'm going to blow through that garbage. In fact, it has identified no specific incidents of adverse events occurring since its failed 2020 attempt to ban ESDs. Every single bit of that is an absolute bald-faced lie, JRC. It's a lie. A provable one. If you go back to the 2020 final ban, and you read through the document like we have done on this channel, what you will find in there are annotations, notes. Let's put it out here, okay? But they presented no evidence at all that it isn't safe. So second and third degree burns on students at your school rush to ERs, where the injuries are written about in detail by ER doctors who you don't pay their paychecks to. That's not evidence. What about the ER photos that were taken of said injuries? Is that not evidence either? What about the 2002 video surveillance footage where you subjected Andre McCollins face down on a 4-point board with a noise-canceling helmet over the head and proceeded to shock him over 31 goddamn times while he is screaming and begging you to stop, begging for mercy, and begging for his life? We all saw the camera footage. Am I supposed to believe that that is not sufficient evidence to prove unreasonable and substantial risk of illness or injury? Or the numerous ER documents noting literally exactly that? Where did those second and third degree burns come from, JRC? Where did it come from? Why? It came from the device, didn't they? They were confirmed. Second, third degree burns is produced by electricity being shot through electrodes directly into the kid's skin, and where those second and third degree burns are, wouldn't you know it, showed right up underneath where you all hook up the electrodes. But that's not sufficient evidence of unreasonable risk of illness or injury. And the fact that you're saying that it failed in 2020. So let's deal with this stupid logic here, shall we? The JRC is asserting that the FDA did not meet their burden of proof at all and are operating off of just trust me broad logic. Except there's this one little pesky thing. We have the entirety of the 2020 final ban rule. That shows the exact opposite. They painstakingly went through ancient clinical studies. And yes, I read through them, JRC. They do not prove your point, and they certainly do not indicate that they are safe to use. Okay? Discounted for two reasons. One, they could not confirm beyond a shadow of the doubt that your GED device, which didn't exist, with some of the 1960s papers you threw forward to defend your insanity, your device didn't even exist in that timeline. So why you're even using that in the first place makes no sense to me. But even if it had, science operates off of most recent data findings that can be replicated, right? In regards to, but you haven't looked at anything that says it's effective or safe. You're showing your bias. No, sweetheart. What we are showing is something that has been proved multiple times. In fact, it had just gotten proved, I'd say, for the first time in 2008 when I was very first made aware of the JRC's existence. You want to know why, other than extremely outdated clinical studies that wouldn't be admitted into any serious court case for anything other than, I don't know, a fucking laugh? That's kind of where I'm at here. You always give the current data more weight than data that is over 3 decades old. Especially considering the way the tests have been conducted throughout time has gotten more and more strenuous as we begin to learn more and more and more about developmental disabilities and mental health. Okay? Those tests do not meet the base type of, sorry, I'm kind of lost for words here. They do not meet the criteria of a clinical study that would be conducted today. They don't prove the JRC's point. The FDA has explained in explicit detail why they do not even address that point. They also explained why, again, in detail, why those case studies are not given that same weight, and just kind of laughed out of the room. You're trying to use paperwork from the time my mom was an infant for a device that didn't even exist in that time period to convince the modern world now that those of us with SIB and AB issues as kids need to go on a human shock collar, and you want the rest of the educated world to take you seriously. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't do that. Okay? It is absolutely batshit insane that you thought the best play was to be bringing these outdated papers that didn't even address anything directly in regards to your device. Not to mention are horrendously outdated. You want us to accept that as proof that it is safe and effective for a device, I'll say it again, that didn't even exist when said clinical study was taking place. How the hell does anyone make any sense out of that? JRC, you need to fire your drug dealer. I mean, because obviously you have to be smoking crack. And not even like quality, like bad trailer park with like one window and 10 people living inside. I don't know. It's just bad. Alright? Bad. Now, what was that number 2 before I took you all down left field? Yes. Ignore ER documents. Ignore video surveillance footage. Ignore the notes written by the JRC's own staff. Ignore the ER doctors who were willing to testify before the panel that actually took and made those ER documents. Or the survivors with their stories, whose ER documents and medical documentation since then backs them up. According to the JRC, well, that does not prove unreasonable and substantial risk of illness or injury. If that's the case, JRC, then nothing fucking does. If you can sit here and tell me that ER documents that clearly detail the injuries that these kids have received from the GED device, along with the doctors coming to add testimony to those ER documents as well as ER photos, and video surveillance footage, if ever there was a smoking gun in a case, it is not more obvious than the JRC. So if you're going to tell me all of that doesn't prove that it does have unreasonable and a substantial risk of illness or injury, to put it lightly, this is not the field for you, obviously. There is a certain level of, common sense and logic that is needed if you're going to be working in a field like this. And quite clearly, if this is what the JRC believes, they do not have the right kind of temperament in the first place to be anywhere near this field. McDonald's is always hiring. Perhaps you should try your luck there. Because to tell people that ER documents, ER photos, and video surveillance footage does not show substantial risk of illness or injury, when we're talking about second and third degree burns, loss of feeling, poor Andre McCollins, catatonic for 2 months after what happened in 2002. Then nothing does. It doesn't get more literal. I couldn't, come up with a fictional story, because we all know I love to write. I've been writing since I was 10 years old. I couldn't come up with a fictional story where the case was this level of obvious. If I were to write this in a novel, people would probably trash it for being far too obvious. Okay? How can you say you cannot prove adverse effects? Well, one of those things of evidence in regards to that the FDA took into consideration were the photos of the injuries of second and third degree burns on the students that you people brought to the ER. If it wasn't the GED, what the hell was it, JRC, and who did it? They don't just magically appear spontaneously on people. I'm just saying. I'm going to read the next part here, because Jesus Christ. Most egregiously, the FDA adverse events have occurred, but have never been reported. Wait, hold on. I missed a sentence there. Where FDA adverse events have occurred. Oh, for God's sake. Hold on, folks. I'm sorry. Where FDA cannot point to the evidence of adverse events from use of ESDs, FDA simply assumes that such adverse events have been underreported, and that the researcher bias and author conflicts of interest also may have contributed to the underreporting of AEs. Oh, for fuck's sake, JRC. Here we go again. Let's rewind this. First of all, when we're talking about mental health here, and we are talking about cause of personal mental health issues, yes, we're talking in hypothetical. I can clearly understand that. Let me ask a question. Does anybody who suffers the level of abuse, starvation, being jumped in the hallways, always waiting, knowing you're going to get shocked next, having your every single move watched, zero privacy, having to perform like a performing fucking seal every day, okay? Yeah. And am I supposed to expect to believe that there wouldn't be some mental health issues that could develop out of that? Let's look at something that's not a hypothetical. My childhood was unadulterated hell. My stepbrother targeted me specifically. Horrific things that are going to haunt me until my dying day, and more than likely, unfortunately, come to haunt me when I become senile. Due to that past, I have post-traumatic stress disorder and severe anxiety disorder. Okay? In my case, I can factually draw a correlation to my mental health issues and what took place back then. Okay? And this was just a bigger, older kid abusing a younger female. Horrific in every way, shape possible. That is true. But it's a pretty direct correlation there. So when I look at the JRC, I look at the video footage, I've read their own words, but clearly with a bias. Anybody who's ever worked in this field and has two brain cells to rub together are going to be heavily scrutinizing your insanity, JRC. Okay? The idea to best assist folks who are having clear behavioral issues is to not continue to abuse them further. It doesn't stop becoming abuse because you want to slap the label treatment on it, and you certainly can't expect the rest of the world to go on with your insanity instead of calling out what we can clearly see what actually is going on there. There's no browbeating us into accepting your insanity. Especially not my ass. Just saying. Okay? As far as underreported, gee, why could that possibly be, JRC? Could it maybe be because the few times students have tried to report about inappropriate shocks and go to the counselors that you told us that they're allowed to do? What those counselors do is they pull out your absolutely abysmal behavior contracts and says, but this thing says I can, so I'm going to continue because of that, The concern, what they're bringing forward alleging abuse, you essentially use their behavioral contract to shut them down and tell them that no, that wasn't abuse, that was a consequence. It's a part of their behavioral contract. And if they keep going, they'll be on loss of privileges because they're not allowed to speak out. Yeah, JRC. We all know how you operate. Okay? It was underreported because you all have never-ending surveillance on every single second of their lives. Okay? The fact that we know you always have staff close by, even in the residences, for when they call parents or anybody outside the school. And what is ever talked about is reported back. As well as the fact that we also know, due to other court cases, that parents have been told to ignore bruises on the skin of their children, nor listen to any complaining in regards to the treatment that they have been receiving, because it's all a part of the treatment program and it's for their best good. Yeah, something's wrong in the state of Denmark, isn't it, JRC? Just saying. Okay? It's underreported because they live under constant threat. I know what that is like. I, too, when dealing with my stepbrother and the horrible physical and sexual abuse that was portrayed upon me at a very young age. Kept my mouth shut for years while it continued. Would you like to know why I did that? Because when I was threatened by him of what would happen to me if I tried to tell, I believed him. Especially since he has already been known to, at that point in time, chase me around with butcher knives through the woods of the 40 acres that we previously lived in years ago. Okay. A lot of kids don't report abuse because we are threatened with either death threats or that they will hurt others that we care about. This whole simply assumes is not the massive jump that JRC is trying to make it out as. Alright? I'm going to finish this paragraph because, God, it's pissing me off. Alright. FDA admits that not all patients treated for SIB and AB are autistic, but still purports to rely on studies opining that generally adverse events may be underreported for autistic individuals, including studies of young autistic children. Not the population at JRC receiving ESDs who are older, and presently all adults with multiple various diagnoses. Okay, let's take that apart. We have never said at any point in time that the people you put on that device were only autistic. If you go through my videos, it shows quite clearly some of them had PTSD before going in. Some of them had whatever, oh my God, the oppositional defiant disorder. I think that's what it is. Don't quote me on that. I am tired and been beaten to death with allergy issues today. We've gone into the fact that you stick people with mental health issues on a device. In fact, I reacted with horror with the fact that you got kids coming in with post-traumatic stress disorder, kids who just came into you from horrifically abusive situations. And the first thing you do is stick them on a torture device. We're well aware that's not just autistic kids. I speak on experiences being autistic, as well as having anxiety or disorder and PTSD, because that's how I can relate to the outside world. To show I understand what is being told to me. I know it's the more neurodivergent way of doing things, but you know what, folks? I'm 40. Fucking deal with it. I'm far past the age of bending over backwards to trying to please others. It was underreported because you have those kids under constant threat. When you're under constant threat, and there is a particularly pertinent threat that has already been given to you in regards to what happens if you open your mouth, you tend to keep your mouth shut until you finally come to a space where you feel safe enough to finally open up about what the hell has happened to you. This isn't rocket science. If you look at just general abuse cases regarding kids, neurotypical or otherwise, you would see that there is clearly a trend of unreported incidences. Okay? Stop playing the victim, JRC. You're not good at it. And nobody believes it at this point. Now, that being said, but they're older and have multitude of various diagnoses. Did we finally discover that comorbid diagnoses exist? Here's the thing, JRC. Throughout the whole world, there's millions of us who are neurodivergent. Out of all those millions and millions of millions, do you really find the kids that come to your doors so unique that only torture works? Because I'm going to call bullshit. The math is still not mathing. I had issues with self-injurious behavior and aggressive behavior when I was a child. I was able to be successfully treated without someone inflicting violence on me. Okay? And not just me, but the millions of kids all over the world receiving services, on treatment programs, responding well and getting better, making actual real changes instead of temporary ones. You can't sit there and tell me that your kids are more severe. Read their case studies. Read their studies. I have. It's not even my job anymore, technically, although I'm still act as mentor and advisor. I've read them. You know what? They exhibited the exact same behaviors that you are using to justify your insanity. And yes, although it wasn't an instant fix, over time, with the triggers being the focus and a proper treatment program and people who are sane and know how to talk to their kid's doctor in regards to medication and potential side effects, they got better. The math backs it up. The data backs it up. Okay? even for the older ones, especially for the older ones. All right. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. It's the fact that you all refuse to find out what the triggers are and work from that angle before the behavior begins to change the situation. I mean, it wasn't just SIB and AB all day, every day, 24/7 when I was a kid. There were lull periods. Okay? To help you work and find out what the triggers are, what reasonable accommodations can be brought in, what self-soothing techniques can be used. Again, folks, that's what the full functional behavioral assessment is for, and why everyone sane insists that that is done first before any choosing in regards to interventions even gets started. So, from this paragraph, we are learning that the JRC does not believe ER documents, ER photos, and video surveillance footage. The doctors who wrote those ER notes coming to testify and corroborate what they have written in the ER record and identifying and making sure that they know that they were the doctors who took those photos doesn't prove a reasonable and substantial risk of illness or injury. What they also don't want you to know is that, but you can't just assume adverse events were happening and that were underreported. The fuck we can't. Considering those that were reported by the students themselves during those few counselor days that you would allow them to have, that you would just pull out that behavioral contract, excuse your evil abuse using it, and then tell them no speaking out, and then nothing gets sent out anywhere outside of the JRC. Not to mention the fact that there's always a staff 2 feet back watching whenever anybody used their residents' phones in order to speak to their family members. So the FDA is not making an odd leap here. They're making a pretty logical leap. Especially considering where that logical leap came from is we have the video surveillance footage, JRC. Are you fucking kidding us? Like, we can see you. The FDA did more than prove their case. The JRC is trying to project their failures to bring forward their burden of evidence that shows us that it is safe and effective, and the fact that they have none of it, or if they do have all this evidence that it is safe and effective, it's in the magical land where AH's mountain of evidence is missing and a whole lot of single pairs of socks that I've had over the years. Magical land. Maybe that's where the unicorns are. We're going to go ahead and close on that, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and folks, please don't forget to hit the comments. I appreciate the time, and as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea absolutely do. Hope you have a good one. I'll see you all in a little bit. Bye, everyone.